Former President Trump claims the government stole his passports during their raid on Mar-a-Lago. I'm going to share this story with you and break down what you need to know to make sure your own passport is safe. Here's the latest from the Daily Mail, in which the Department of Justice has slapped down Trump's claims that the feds stole 3 of his passports during their Mar-a-Lago raid. He has warned the agency terrible things are going to happen if we don't turn down the heat. And so we're going to talk about why his passports may have been taken, and what that means for his citizenship, and maybe some alternatives that people think may exist for him to protect himself. If it's your first time here, I'm Andrew Henderson, founder of Nomad Capitalist. We are a boutique consulting firm that helps 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors legally go where you're treated best, and that includes having a second citizenship, legally reducing your taxes the same way former President Trump did by moving to Florida, and diversifying and protecting your assets. You can learn more at nomadcapitalist.com. So, Donald Trump claims his passports were stolen in the raid on Mar-a-Lago. If true, the Daily Mail says, he cannot leave the country. That point may be true. So let me break down the idea of dual citizenship. People come to us, for example, and say, I want dual citizenship. If something crazy happens, I want to be able to get out of the country. Now, obviously every country is different and every scenario is different. There are certainly some scenarios where one could, let's say during a pandemic or in some other incident, say, hey, I need to get out of the country. I'm going to my other country. Here's that passport. Let me out. And so if you live in the United States, if you live in Canada, getting citizenship by investment, for example, in a Caribbean country where you have, let's say, JetBlue flights going directly to Antigua or some other country. Dominica recently opened up flights directly from Miami a couple times a week on American. Most of those islands, which you can obtain citizenship in a matter of months, you can get to directly. Not so much the case for where I live, but if you live in the US or Canada, you can do that. Some European countries where you could get citizenship by descent. Trump's mother, for example, was from Scotland. And so there may be a claim that he could obtain citizenship in the UK. The rules have changed over the years. And so certainly you'll have flights from the UK to a citizenship by investment country, or if you're Trump, you would have claim, to go to the UK from the US. And so, there are some situations, depending on the country, where, hey, I'm going here and let me out. However, the general situation is, for the United States and a number of other countries, you are required to enter and to leave the country using that passport. And so if you're a dual citizen, let's say you're American, let's say you're British, you would enter the United States as a U.S. citizen. You would leave the United States as a U.S. citizen. Now, the United States doesn't have the same exit controls that some countries do, but you're supposed to use that passport when flying out. And then when you get to the other country, many other countries have regulations that you're required to use that passport. I have a couple of citizenships where they have said, and the rules are, you do not, we don't really care what you use, right? But generally speaking, when you are in a country, even if that country allows dual citizenship, which the United States does, the UK does, the Caribbean countries do. Not the Caribbean countries don't factor into Donald Trump's situation, but they may recognize dual citizenship, but they're going to treat you as their own citizen first. And so if you have a legal problem in the United States, you can't waive your other passport and say, hey, come and get me out of trouble. Now, there may be some lobbying efforts, right? But you're going to have diminished abilities to use your other citizenship in that country because you're a citizen of that country. And you've seen that the media makes it to be a big deal when people who have Iranian citizenship go back to Iran and Iran has some reason to keep them. Not saying that that's right or wrong, but what I'm saying is if a country deems you their citizen, they're going to do what they do to other citizens, and they may disregard the fact that you hold other citizenship, even though they allow you to hold that other citizenship. And so, in the sense, yes, if you don't have a passport, you can't leave the country, which is why everyone, by the way, should get their first country's passport. People hear us talk about second citizenship, and I think some people watching don't even have their U.S. passport. I know that for a fact because I've heard from some people. You don't have your U.S. passport, or let's say you are entitled to another passport. I've talked to people who were born in Brazil, born in Mexico, born in Canada. You're a citizen of that country by birth. You ought to have that passport and the passport of, let's say, the U.S. So if you're a dual citizen already, have both passports at all times. Again, legally speaking, if you're a U.S. citizen in the United States, you're supposed to use a U.S. passport to leave. So if you don't even have the first passport, you can't go anywhere. Right? Theoretically, you could have like one of those passport cards, and you could go to Canada or Mexico. But I guess they probably would have, if they stole the passports, as just Trump claimed, taken those as well. And so having the second passport may not help you get out once things are already too tough. The point of the second passport is to be out before things are too tough. Now, I'm not saying, because obviously if people have different opinions, did Trump do something right, did Trump do something wrong? I'm not commenting on that. I'm commenting on the citizenship and passport aspects. And so if you think there's going to be some kind of trouble, whether it's a generalized trouble like it's a pandemic, or you think like you're in a country where they're taking political action against you, yeah, you probably don't want to be there, right? I mean, that's why people who are, deposed politicians call up their friends. They're like, hey, get me out of here. I'm saying follow the law. You should follow the law. You should not rely on a second passport to get you out of trouble. Because, by the way, some countries that issue second passports, like Malta, by the way, are going to look at you for 5 years after you get their passport, and if you don't keep your nose clean, they're going to take back the passport. Caribbean countries, depending on what you do, might say, you know what, this is a breach of our deal. We're going to cancel your passport. I think the situations are very rare, but obviously I wouldn't want someone to rely on a second passport to go out and do untoward stuff. However, what people are suggesting, and I'm not buying into this or not, what people are suggesting is Trump is a victim of some kind of political action. And so, okay, what a political action victim might want to do is stick around and clear their name. However, he can't leave the country in general. I mean, that is the fact. And so if you had a second passport, would that make it better? I don't necessarily know that that's the case. You'd want to be out in advance. And so, again, we're talking to folks here who want to be out before the next situation where they can't leave, where just nobody can leave, or the situation when taxes go through the roof and you're stuck, or the situation when they start confiscating assets or bailing in bank accounts. You may not want to be there. You and your assets may want to be somewhere else. And so just a second passport alone is a good first step, but it's not every step. And so it's important, in my opinion, if you're going to to get a second passport and then use it. Don't just keep it in the nightstand drawer and never travel. Go somewhere else. Leave your country, leave the United States, and go somewhere else on your second passport and see what life is like. See where you can set up a second residence and have that ready. But in Trump's case, he does not, as I know, he has golf courses overseas. So if he has a residence there, maybe he should look at, should I go there? I certainly think that any golf course in the UK, they're going to send it back if there's a problem. And so what theoretically I think is important is if you have a second residence, one thing a lot of Americans are doing right now is getting second residence in Mexico. Mexico being next door, you may not want to rely on having your U.S. passport attached to that Mexican residence, because what a lot of Latin American countries, including Mexico, do is they require you to enter on the passport that you are using. And so if you for some reason are unable to travel on a U.S. passport, you could, or any country's passport, you would want to have a residence somewhere else that's attached to a different passport. So you got that Caribbean passport, and then you would come into, let's say, Mexico on that country's passport. Or you could get Mexican residence and work towards Mexican citizenship, in which cases generally it'd be advised to enter Mexico on your Mexican citizenship, your Mexican passport. And so, again, obviously, the nature of the fact that people are saying, oh, we did something wrong, others are saying it's just a political witch hunt. You want to be careful, because obviously, you're not going to be able to use second passports to just get out of all kinds of trouble. But if you're just being like, hey, you can't travel, that's a problem. And so what Trump said was they stole all three passports. What the Daily Mail surmises, and I think this is probably accurate, he said one of them was expired. And then they suggested, hey, he probably has a service passport and also a diplomatic passport. As well as he would have a previous passport from before his time in office. And so the government can take anyone's passports that it wants. The government can cancel your passport. Can't cancel your citizenship, right? Just because you don't have a passport in your possession doesn't mean you're a citizen. You can live in the United States if you're a U.S. citizen. And Donald Trump, like most of us, is or was a U.S. citizen by virtue of being born in the United States, not even because of his parents. And so just because you don't have a passport, you're still a citizen. You can still live there. And by the way, you can still be a citizen somewhere else, and you can go and get a one-way passport and get a one-way ticket back to the U.S., and they'll handle whatever matters you need to handle. So you could always get an emergency passport. You can always stay in your country. But a passport for the purposes of traveling, they can cancel that. So for example, if you have unpaid tax bills, obviously Trump is wrapped up in, again, whether you believe it or not, a number of different investigations regarding his tax affairs. I think a lot of them are based on the state level. But if you owe the IRS $50,000 or more, this is what I always say. I mean, it's easy to get into a dispute. He says, hey, I don't owe the money. I believe I did everything right. If he's found to owe some money and he doesn't want to pay it for a while, there was kind of a contempt issue recently where he's like, I'm not going to do what you ask. And he eventually did do what they asked, and he was released from contempt. But if you get a ruling against you and you owed some money, it would take a while, but eventually they'd be like, hey, we're going to cancel your passport. You can't travel. And so you would have plenty of opportunities to work that out. It's not like the next day they just lock you down. But theoretically, someone at his level could easily accumulate $50,000 in tax debt. If you're half paying attention, you would know. And so again, you'd have to resolve it. But it certainly puts some pressure on you to make sure that, hey, I mean, you should pay your taxes. But if you are disputing something, as it seems Trump is disputing a number of things in these different investigations, that could pose a risk to your ability to get a passport or for it to continue to be valid. And so even if they don't take the physical passport, they can simply turn it off. That said, your passports, again, are the product, or the property of the government. And so they can take it whenever they want. When I gave up U.S. citizenship, you go in and you give them your passport, and sometimes they'll send you back a canceled passport. Generally, the trend is now it seems like they're not doing that. But that's their passport. They can do whatever it is they want. And so they've at times been nice enough to say, hey, all right, here's your souvenir canceled passport, the same way that you might have, I think as Trump was alluding to, you have a passport, after 10 years, they give it back to you with a couple of holes in it, and you get the new passport without the holes. But they can take that if they want. They can take the expired passport if they want. And so the bottom line about Trump's situation is basically they can do that. Your country can ground you. And if you want to not be in the same situation, again, obviously Donald Trump is in a very unique situation. It is very political. He's accused of doing some things, and obviously there's some things that, who knows what the accusations are. Hopefully, none of us find ourselves in that situation. However, certainly you look at countries around the world, there are people who might find themselves victims of political persecution. There are certainly, places in the world people have got an itchy trigger finger in terms of, shooting first and asking questions later, in terms of accusing business owners for doing certain things. I've seen that happening. I've seen those headlines. They go after people, they drag business owners through the mud, and they later find out they didn't do anything wrong. Sorry. There's no press release when they say they're sorry. And so protecting yourself, I think, by simply living overseas would be the smart thing to do. And by the way, when Trump was campaigning in 2020, he said if he lost to Joe Biden, you won't see me anymore, I'll be living somewhere overseas. And, as so many people who threaten to give up citizenship or move overseas, if Bush wins or Obama wins or whatever the case may be, Trump wins, he didn't do it, right? Maybe he should. Maybe he should look at an ancestral passport. I think some citizenship by investment programs, given all the different investigations and all the different issues, would be very wary at giving him citizenship for a donation. I would imagine there are some countries that perhaps agree with him politically where the president would just, grant him citizenship. And so there's certainly some contentiousness around all those different issues. But I don't know that he's just going to go through a citizenship by investment program and that they would want that. That would certainly be a challenge, especially a Caribbean country that's in the sphere of influence of the U.S. and would be very concerned about the risk. But if you're entitled to citizenship by descent, you're entitled to citizenship by descent. Again, there may be countries that would just gift him citizenship. Certainly that happens to politicians who fall out of favor in their own countries, whether it's a permanent residence they're gifted or citizenship, whether you're a politician from Thailand or all kinds of other countries. And so, for you, the answer is comply with the law, pay your taxes. If you don't like to pay the taxes, legally go where you're treated best. You can live overseas as an American and dramatically reduce how much you pay. And if you do that, you're going to reduce, naturally, the amount of risk that you have in terms of owing tax. Because if you are qualifying, for example, for the foreign earned income exclusion, if your business is offshore and you're paying a lot less in tax, your odds of racking up a $50,000 tax bill or having a dispute or not being aware of something, obviously it should be unintentional, right? But if you did something unintentionally, the odds of that happening are a lot less if your tax rate is a lot less overseas. And so that would be a good first step to protect yourself. And then, if you have a problem with your home country, you are going to have a little bit easier time. And so again, let me say it one more time. I don't want anyone to take this as go out and do bad stuff and get in trouble and then rely on a second passport to save you. But there are certainly disagreements. Donald Trump has not been convicted of anything, but certainly people who are perhaps being investigated may be told, hey, don't travel. Maybe that's what the government's saying. And so certainly I would at least want to mount a defense from somewhere where I had money available to me and where I was able to actually mount a defense. I would like to think that Donald Trump, if there was some kind of next step, would address it and would just resolve it through the legal system. But to be able to not travel to your own country, that's problematic. And so do remember that the government owns your passports. They control you. They can cancel it anytime they want. They can even cancel in some extreme cases your citizenship, mostly related to terrorism-related stuff, but they are pushing to cancel more passports. They are pushing to take away more of your rights to travel. And I think it's in that context where the UK says, let's stop hooligans from soccer matches or football matches. Let's stop them. They urinated in a fountain somewhere in Latvia. Let's cancel their passports. They can't travel and embarrass anymore. Why don't we leave it to Latvia to do whatever they want to people who urinate in their fountains, rather than the UK saying you can't travel? But a lot of Western countries are going down that road. And so it's in that context, not that you've really committed a crime, not that you've really done anything that's run afoul of the rules, that you didn't pay your taxes, but that the precedent just is, we don't like you. We want to send a message. And so in that regard, second citizenship is a very valuable thing to protect yourself against one country. Donald Trump, perhaps, as much as all the thorny political issues involved, perhaps should have moved overseas. May not have reduced his taxes to the extent that people have surmised he hasn't paid much in tax. But it certainly would have given him more freedom and more optionality. And I think having money around the world would be, as Donald Trump says, a good thing, not a bad thing.